Good morning. My colleague, Mrs. Smith, and I will demonstrate some basic counseling skills today. I will play the role of the counselor. Mrs. Smith will play the client or a concerned colleague in most scenarios. Mrs. Gray, I think you forgot to introduce yourself. Mrs. Gray will direct the demonstrations and model counseling techniques. Most of the time, she will act as the counselor in these sessions. Let's begin with talking about basic counseling skills. Can you list for us, Mrs. Smith, the 3 most basic skills needed as a counselor? I believe I can, Mrs. Gray. That was back in our first class. Some important first skills are to develop a pattern for counseling sessions, to use active listening, to use body language correctly, and to modulate your vocal tone. Oh, and how to take notes without being distracting to the client. Excellent, Mrs. Smith. Can you tell us about establishing a pattern for sessions? I can certainly try, Mrs. Gray. First, you greet the person, and make sure you have the correct information, such as their name. That's pretty important for the first session. It certainly is, Mrs. Smith. What kind of question will you use to get information such as the client's name? Oh, that would be a closed question, Mrs. Gray. Closed questions can usually be answered with a yes or no, or 1 or 2 words. Are closed questions the only kind you will use, Mrs. Smith? Oh, no, they are not. If I only ask closed questions, I won't give the client a chance to talk. Most of the time I'll want to use open questions, to give the person a chance to tell me what is going on. Will you always use open questions during a counseling session, Mrs. Smith? Most of the time, Mrs. Gray. But sometimes it is alright to use closed questions. They are useful for getting specific information and also for redirecting a client who has gotten off track. Just as I think this conversation might have gotten away from establishing a pattern for sessions. Do you think so, Mrs. Smith? Indeed, I do, Mrs. Gray. I believe we are talking about techniques that will be used within the session. Yes, we are. But these techniques could become part of establishing the pattern of the session. Knowing when to use open or closed questions can be an important technique. I guess they would be. Are there other techniques that help establish a pattern? There are. Think for just a minute, and believe you should be able to recall others. Okay, let me think. How about active listening? Very good, Mrs. Smith. How is active listening different from just listening? Active listening is paying attention to the words the person is saying, but also observing their body language, vocal tone and facial expressions. It is also keeping an open, non-judgmental attitude about the content, while making note of important facts. Oh, and speaking of notes, you want to keep writing stuff down to a minimum because it worries some clients, but sometimes something really important will come up and you need to make a note, so you should always be prepared. Well said. Now, what about when the allotted time for the session is up? That really is one of the important parts of establishing a pattern. You don't ever want the person to go away feeling as if you were just watching a clock and listening with half an ear to what they were saying. That is for certain. What are some things you can do to establish that you care about them and about their continued progress? Well, you can give them homework. Homework. Are you sure about that, Mrs. Smith? Yes, I am, Mrs. Gray. Give them something to do or to think about before the next session that could help them with their situation. Oh, and reward them for talking with you. Well, I can see how that would work with little children. Does it work for everyone? Now, Mrs. Gray, have you forgotten about telling us about the goodie bag? Everyone loves to get free stuff. You just have to make the goodie bag fit the age of the person and their situation. Right you are, Mrs. Smith. Developing a good set of goodie bags isn't always easy, but pamphlets with helpful information, sample items or even just something like a squeeze ball for attention helps the person feel as if they have come away with something tangible for their time. The right goodie at the right time might make a big difference, so I guess a well-stocked goodie bag needs something besides lollipops. Yes, although one should never underestimate the power of chocolate. Oh, Mrs. Gray, you are so funny. Should we go back through the techniques we have mentioned here? Yes, Mrs. Smith. Let's write them out for everyone. And that's it for us. Until next time, try some of this, and we'll talk about how well it worked for next time. Gosh, I hope we did this right.